Welcome to the discussion of Biden's foreign policy. So we've all kind of read the article. Why don't we go around and give initial impressions, opening comments? Joe, we'll start with you.
Oh, I have to pass. I'm probably the one in the room who hasn't seen the video, so.
What about, have you read the article?
No.
Okay.
It's all right.
Ken?
I gotta start, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's another one of those complex topics, at least it's current events kind of stuff, and, you know, my general impression is that Biden, like every president, inherits something from another president, and he inherited a lot of the poor choices made by the previous president, and in terms of forwarding his agenda, he is probably thwarted by a misinformation campaign fueled by social media and by partisan politics that's unprecedented. And it's going to be a hard thing for him to
Nancy?
I have never studied foreign policy, and I liked reading both these things, although I think one of them, it was sort of pessimistic, but both pointing out how divided the country is and how that's going to affect foreign policy.
Val? Okay. Marianne?
Well, the essay struck me as one more reminder, it's all China, 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 and what's going to happen over the next couple of decades. And one thing I thought was interesting in the video, he had that one little chart that showed the last, I think, 8 presidents, and 4 of them have only served 1 term. And in the essay, it also mentioned that some foreign countries, especially our allies or former allies, tend to think, well, wait 4 years, whatever the United States is doing will change anyway. And they may have a point.
Mm-hmm. Mike?
You know, one of the main things that struck me, among other things, was systemic rivalry. In other words, people are deciding on systems, on democracy or state communism, and a lot of people are going with state communism because they're doing well. But you know, I found the article very pessimistic. All of these things, and Biden's got to bring back the things that Trump tore up.
Good job ahead of him of getting everyone back to, and yet democracy doesn't seem to be doing too well here anyway.
Right.
So, you know, we are trying to invite people to join our way of thinking when we're not quite sure how our way of thinking is going to go.
Tony?
Well, it's interesting. I'm watching for the 4th or 5th time West Wing. It's a phenomenal series that emulates what's going on in the White House. And all I kept thinking about is what our presidents are going through. It's identical. The same issues. It's like, and this is like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So I would advise, if you have HBO, it's on you can get the whole series on HBO. And I mean, it's like Sean, what's his name? He's from Dayton.
Yeah.
Oh.
It could be president because he's been through everything.
Martin Sheen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Martin Sheen. He's been through everything. The same issues, similar issues with the similar countries. So, and it's unbelievable. And with the video we watched, I like the graphs because it points out that the same thing over all the years, when it comes to internal policies, political issues are different. I mean, you have the red and the blue. But when it comes to foreign policies, it seems like there's more cohesiveness. Anything like would bring us together is something like that's disastrous outside the United States. So it's really interesting. And the book, who read the book? It was really complicated for me. But I thought if I brought West Wing to today, the series, I don't know how many seasons there are, but there's quite a few. It would be the same thing we have going on today. The same issues, similar.
Tony, in West Wing, do they still have the same hyper partisanship?
Yes, yes,
Bad as it is now?
yes. And the Democrats were fighting each other, and the Republicans were fighting with each other.
I didn't watch. I think that's the problem.
Comments on the article? Comments on the article?
No.
Yeah, we also have one.
Late arrival. I see the late arrival, but I also see Larry, who's been here. So Larry,
Yes,
what are your comments?
I'm sorry,
What are your opening comments?
my opening comments. Well, I did look at I watched the video and I did the reading and I thought it was a pretty good summary layout of the different world conditions of the past half century or so. And of course, in here, in the reading, the big giant in the woods is China, the menacing power. But it turns out that in the meantime, we're having to cope a little bit more with the Russians than was anticipated when this particular article was written.
Scott? Scott Griswold?
There we go. Good morning. My opening comments are, I thought the video presentation was very, very well done. And I just wish more and more people that I know would listen and understand what is going on in our world as it was presented in that video. Because for me, I don't think we take seriously enough our election of a president or anybody in higher office. The article brought out one point that I thought was important, and it was the most important step in countering Chinese ambitions is to make our liberal democracy work at home. I don't necessarily think they need to say liberal, but we need to make democracy work. And I think the presidency is such an important part of who we are. And we even heard in the video the decline of the power of the presidency. And it just disturbs me immensely that we think how we approach electing a president based on the fact that, and I hate to make the statement, I can fix everything, isn't enough. These people need to be so educated in all aspects of domestic and foreign policy decision. I sure as hell don't know who'd want even to have the job, but I thought it was very powerful. And I want to share that with more people. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Oh, Ken Librow.
Ken?
Ken.
Ken?
I'm just happy that I found the meeting. That's all I had to say about that.
Okay.
But I
Again.
started.
Brenda that joined us on Facebook.
Brenda?
Yeah,
I
Brenda.
started.
He's still in the starting block.
Okay.
My God, I wasn't gonna leave the library until I found you all.
Brenda, would you like to share your opening comments?
Come off of mute, Brenda.
She doesn't want to say.
It's
Okay.
good to see you, Brenda.
Hi there. I haven't really
Hey.
read it, so I'm just here to listen to you.
Okay. All right. Well, I was interested that many of you pointed out that the article seemed to be very pessimistic. That struck me immediately, was the pessimism in this article. Why do you think there is so much pessimism right now in terms of the United States and its approach to foreign policy? What's going on that has made everything kind of not as optimistic as it used to be?
It used to be Unipol. We were the big gorilla, we were the king. Now, here comes China. It's a whole new world.
Okay.
Let me ask, can you all hear us pretty well? Okay.
Larry, can you hear?
Give us thumbs up, Larry, if you can hear us well. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I have an opinion.
Yeah.
I think with the changes in administrations, first we're the leaders and then we want to be isolated. And now we want to get back to where we were. We lost a big opportunity because China stepped in. Okay. And what happened, I think, was really shown in the video that when Trump backed off and pulled out of certain areas, and then Biden goes in and he pulls out of Afghanistan. I mean, the issues that we're facing with now is Russia today is doing what it's doing because it thinks it could get away with it. And China's waiting to see what Russia does. And it's ready to make the move with Taiwan and the other islands off of China Sea. So it's really very difficult to get back into where we used to be.
The author's view, I mean, I have highlighted this, the author of the essay here says that an indication of pessimism would be that the post-war decades of rising economic opportunity and social consensus have come to an end. In its place, Western industrial societies have experienced one of the basic problems: economic inequality, political polarization, and an erosion of trust in basic institutions.
You know, one of the things that struck me was we let China in the World Trade Organization. That allowed, that was 2000. That allowed them to create all these networks and trade deals with other countries. And now we're paying for it.
Were we short-sighted at that time, or were we thinking that China, by becoming a member of the world community, would become more outgoing and more liberal in its outlook?
That's what it was.
I think
That was
that's
the
what
theory.
it was.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But cooperate with China.
And we all learned differently.
We all learn differently. Can liberal democracies compete in a rapidly changing world?
Well, it's a
Mary Ann?
problem. Go ahead.
I personally think that's the scariest thing about what's happening with China. Because it's one thing if they become the biggest economy and we're second, you know, we don't like to be second, but we can live with that. But if autocracy or totalitarianism and lack of human rights, you know, people telling you how many children you can have ends up taking over, if the majority of countries decide to go with that, I think that's really scary.
Other comments? Thoughts?
Like the Jews.
Mike?
I don't know what to say. Sounds very important. It's really-
I pretty much agree with that last comment. I too am fairly pessimistic about the situation. You know, China wasn't always that concerning. It's the new presidency. And I've talked to a number of people who have come over from China. They had it pretty good until the next regime, the current one, came in. And that is the big issue. But that video really brought out for me the pessimism based on the fact that, you know, this partisanship that we have here in America, both foreign and domestic, is really creating this problem, along with social media and all of the misinformation that is going on. All you have to do is just listen to all of the different news networks, and you really don't get the information that you need that I saw in this particular video and what I read in the book. So I hope things change, but it's going to take a lot of work on our side,
Larry?
right here.
You're right. Larry?
Yes.
Larry Nordslab?
Yes. I think one of the major issues is that the many people in the United States felt that we pretty much had international relations under control when you had the breakdown of the Soviet Union bloc. And we went into the 1990s and beyond with the expansion of NATO, and China at that time was not nearly as formidable a power as it is now. And I think Americans kind of got in the habit of just coasting along when it came to foreign policy issues. But now the the world has has changed, and then we had the very dramatic election of President Donald Trump, which set everything upside down. The United States basically abrogated previous commitments, confused the world as to where we stood, and China, in the meantime, was growing and growing more powerful and consolidating. So I think a lot of this just hit. Americans just didn't see this coming, and they didn't notice it even when it was going by.
Okay. Yeah.
Feedback on that, I'm throwing out the question of how much did the handling of Russia during this previous administration kind of upset the apple cart in terms of what relations with everybody? That's something
Can you repeat that louder so they can hear it? Just say,
I'm just trying to get a feel for, because I brought it up in a webinar that I was on last week about Russia. And you have to say that the handling of Putin during the previous administration was a bit unique. And, and I'm wondering how much did that change the whole complexion of our foreign policy?
How did Trump's handling of Putin change how we look at Russia and how we handle foreign policy?
I saw
Anyone
some,
have
yeah,
comments?
I saw somewhere when Obama was in administration and he let Russia and Putin take a part of Ukraine,
Mhm.
that set the stage for Putin to get more of what was Soviet Union. And then I think we had last session where we talked about went in and did more search on what Putin, why he's doing what he's doing. At one time, Soviet Union included all of the areas, that he's trying to get and all the resources. I posted on Facebook all the resources that Ukraine has. It's like number one in certain resources. And it's over Europe in it has all kinds of minerals, oil and gas. I posted on Facebook the other day. A lot of people didn't understand. Now they do why Ukraine is so important to Russia. Okay. And we were talking, it was the last session. It opened up more of Putin's reasons for doing this, which is understandable why he's doing it. It's the lack of population growth. Remember the population? Russia, they're getting older, and most of the people, for a country to grow, has to be younger. And that's one of the reasons why he's also trying to get back to Soviet Union, because, in other words, for countries, because of the population and the demographics of the population. Am I right?
Yep. Mhm.
Tony, did you see the one comment on that article you posted? I didn't recognize the name of the person who put it there. It wasn't any of us. But they said, don't be taken in by this. It's all a lie. It may have just been a typical internet troll.
It could have been. You know what? I didn't research it, but normally I do. But it struck me so much that this is a good reason why Russia would want to.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just such a wealth of resources.
Mhm.
One thing about democracies is they can get to be debating societies. You can't, it's hard to make a decision. Dictators just do, China, they just do what they want to do and everybody follows.
Mhm.
Or gets thrown in jail.
Which is the question of, can a liberal democracy respond?
Yeah, that's it.
That's why I brought it up. Because it is easier for autocracies to make decisions and get them put into place, where democracies, we have to discuss and discuss again, and in 4 years, we'll rediscuss.
And then the next administration will continue to discuss.
Yes.
A good example is what's going on right now.
Mhm.
When it's political, nothing happens unless one side has the majority.
I mean, everybody's made that comment. We're not exactly an example to the world. January 6th didn't tell.
Yeah, that did not help.
No, that was
That was disastrous.
that's scary.
What those were patriots.
Not all of them were.
What do you envision as the role of the United States in a multipolar world? Let's get away from the dichotomy. We're now entering a multipolar world where China, the United States, the EU, Russia are all important powers, with India and Brazil in the background. how, what is our role in such a multipolar world?
Well,
Ken?
we used to be the world leader. We were the, the most formidable military power ever. We were the unquestioned defenders of democracy. And now we've got China, which is almost on a par with us as far as the power of the military. And China is almost at a par with us in terms of influence. So, we just don't have the, we can't have the influence that we used to have. If we can't clean up our own backyard here, how can we project an image of, listen to us, we know what's best.
I think you're right. We need to do is get more moderates and get rid of the right and the left extremes, where the moderates can make things happen much quicker.
An idea that was new to me, I think it was in the video, Nixon and Kissinger, one of them said the ideal situation is when you have the, 4 or 5 different strong countries, that it was good. I'd like to know, more about that.
Mhm. I think it was referred to as the Kissinger. It's healthy for the great powers to jointly manage the global system.
And equally sharing costs and people,
That's right.
That's why the United Nations is so important. Get rid of the veto.
Mhm.
Only 5, I think it's 5
Five.
countries, and that's wrong, because Russia will veto anything that US is promoting and vice versa. Do what the majority wants.
And if Russia doesn't, China will.
Yes.
Well, not the majority. I don't know how, does each country have one vote?
Maybe
Not
2/3 majority or something of that nature.
Okay, I want to tell you a story. And the story is about millions of years ago. It comes from Indonesia. Early time frame, there was a few trees, few animals, and few human beings. One day, the tree told the animal, "You are spoiling my area. It's no good." They were all 3 little friends. And the animal said, "Okay, I will get out of this place." So animal went to the mountain. Then the human being comes and they started cutting the tree. They spoiled the tree. What happened? By the end of the day or month or year, the tree is gone. Animal went to the mountain. He couldn't find a place to survive, passed away. So this is the story of discovery, of diversity. Yeah, the people are different people, come together, understand each other, and they can do the better thing. What happened? And you're talking about China, you're talking about Middle East, you're talking about South America. Everybody is thinking that we, me, not we. So until unless you think that yes, diversity is something that brings us together and can do better things. This is Earth. Nobody owns this Earth. Sun, nobody owns the sun. The planet, nobody owns it. We are here for a certain time and we will be gone. But if this is a time to understand each other. What about China or Russia, United States, everybody said, we have power. We have nuclear power, we can destroy. But that's not the thing is going to work. So the best thing is to, we have United Nations. And even people come to the United Nations and they talk their own terms. They're talking about the diversity for everybody. See the China, what they have China taken. They took away all the what do you call it, all the Buddhist land. They took away everything. They took away they are going to take away the Taiwan, things like that. And so that's what happened. What Russia is trying to do, take away the Ukraine. And this is what happened. People, they don't understand other people's, survival need. That's the important thing. And this is a time when the people should come together and think that, yes, this whole thing, this whole universe, world belongs to us, not to, a certain part of the people, certain people, they have certain, social systems, social cultural things like that. They think we own this. And that's not going to work. And that's what's happening to us. Everything is going out. That's what my point of view is. Until we bring the diversity together and people understand we have a different language, we have a different culture, doesn't matter. We are here on this planet, on this earth. We have to be closer to each other and think about other people's issues also. So that's what the biggest problem is, I think.
The biggest issue then is people don't communicate with each other. They don't listen to each other to know what the other people's needs are.
That's what it is. We are from different people. We come from a different culture, different background, ideology, different, a lot of things different. But if we come together, we can make things better. And that's where, just like making a garden and let the flower grow. So that's what the important thing is. That's very important.
So cooperation is the key.
Yes, cooperation. It's diversity, get the diversity. See, just think about the United States. How many different people they have here? And that's why one of the things the United States, it went on the top of the world because they brought the people different broad, no matter what. They have different culture, different ethnicity, things like that. They brought things together. And he said, okay, let's think, do the better thing. And that's what the United States became the top of the world. So that's what
The bottom line is, put yourself in the other person's shoes and understand where they're coming from.
So the importance of diplomacy and negotiation, which I admit I don't really put much stock in, but that seems like that's what you gotta do.
Right.
That's what we have to do.
Several times he makes the point about climate change. You're going to have to cooperate. There's no other way to do it. And pandemics. If everybody's not on board, it ain't going to work.
A good example is when we discovered COVID in the United States and everybody got together. And what happened? In a very short time, a vaccine was developed because of the cooperation. And everybody in both sides approved the trillions of dollars to take care of what was needed.
Mhm.
I think we're overlooking the fact that we're just emerging from 4 years of narcissism, nationalism. You can't just flip a switch and get back to our better selves. And that, I don't know if we will be able to get back to our better selves.
No.
I'm not a real optimist right now, but I think it was the 4 years there of very bad times, so.
It would help if we had statesmanship in our politicians.
They seem to forget what it was.
Okay.
Okay, very good.
In terms then of what we've been talking about, what do you think Biden's foreign policy priorities should be? Should we work more with talking to China, Russia? Do we need to hold more multilateral discussions on issues like climate change? I mean, we've got the climate forum every year? There is a climate forum
Right.
internationally, which our former president did not participate in. But are those decisions being made in those multilateral discussions being implemented?
I think, go ahead.
No, generally no,
Okay,
because
because,
everybody looks at this climate change or any other issue from the standpoint of their own economic interests. You know, I mean, the move to electrify American vehicles, you know, it stalled because the oil industry has a vested interest in not letting this happen. Everybody has their own economic self-interest, whether it's a city, a state, a country, or the world. They're all looking out for themselves. So I'm not optimistic about it.
Can I ask a question?
yes.
Can I ask a question? You
Yes, Scott.
know, there are so many different places that we can be, and there are a number of qualified people that the president can move towards these directions in climate change and foreign policy and stuff. But I have to ask the question, where should his voice be the strongest right now? That's what I'd like to know. Where can he himself, you know, have the strongest voice to correct things? I mean, does he need to have a stronger voice towards both sides of Congress and tell them to get their I'm just wanting to figure out, as the president, where should he have his strongest voice? Himself.
And where can the president put his energies? Where should he put his energies to make the most effective change?
Himself,
Is that
yes.
what you're
And be,
asking?
yeah, himself,
Like-
his voice, not
voice.
somebody
In other words-
else's, but him.
He needs to go into the Senate and speak to the senators, both sides, and try to work it out that we need to work together. You know, there has to be compromise. If there isn't compromise, you're going to have a stalemate.
He
Okay.
needs the tough love, tough
Yeah.
parent. Be the tough parent. Straighten these
How
kids
can
out.
he be the tough parent?
I don't
Take the paddle out.
It might be impossible.
Yeah, he's only one big executive or one of three branches. So.
And the Democrats gonna lose, probably lose the House. It's gonna be even worse.
In the next election, they're looking at losing the House and the Senate. Well, the Senate's evenly divided. And that's going to be a main thing. Joe?
I get a lot of political advertisements, and we all do, I'm sure. I was taking note how many of them have the word fight in it, and it's upwards of 90%. Everybody wants to fight for me. And when I have enough patience, I write back and I say, when you start saying compromise, call me. We have a fight mentality. I think I blame Trump for this.
Yes.
I think he created and he divided our country, and the two parties no longer seem to be able to find a common ground. And I think unless we solve that problem, it's going to be perceived as a weakness from bullies like Putin, and they're going to be tempted to pursue that weakness. And that's where I would start if I were him. I would try to find some way to get back to this idea that a two-party system is based on compromise, not fight, compromise.
Boy. Marianne?
I think the most crucial thing right now is what happens in Ukraine. Because where all the domestic issues, you've got the Republican, Democrat split, and even each party can't unify. But if Putin actually invades Ukraine with his 150,000 troops, and we've got what, 3,000 over there? I think that might be something that could bring the parties together. And in the end, make Biden a stronger voice. Because he's tried to pass these bills about climate change, the mask mandates and everything so far has just led to a fight. They don't seem to be able to come to any compromise. But I think if Putin actually goes ahead and invades, that might be something that could be a unifying factor.
Well, I have a question. Should we implement the, some of the boycotts now? Or wait until they attack Ukraine?
See, I come back to Putin's a bully, and when you're dealing with a bully, they only understand power. So I think to say we're gonna do something and to not do it and to sit on our hands and wait until he does something is probably ill-advised. But then you have the group of people who say, well, let's don't be provocators, or let's don't, be the reason that we do move into some sort of a major conflict. So I think there's an interesting debate, but I think you can only get Putin's attention by acting with some sort of power. He doesn't understand this soft,
I agree.
it's gonna be rough later on you, trust me, approach.
So should we go back to the Cold War relationships and try to re-implement some of the Cold War policies and procedures?
I wish I had a crystal ball. I don't know what the answer is. I can see arguments on both sides, but it's a tough call.
Could the United Nations pass some, would that matter to him if the United Nations passed something that sort of condemns his act?
That's where this,
Against the state.
That's a good question.
well, the Security Council will veto it with Russia and China.
So we've got the Security Council veto. It would have to be something coming out of the General Assembly. And we don't know what will happen in the General Assembly.
Okay, you have to understand about Ukraine and Russia. By ethnicity, by culture wise, both are the same. They speak the Russian language. They have the same, they have been for many, many generations. What happened? Why is Ukraine want to be separate? Because some of the countries, they wanted to be part of NATO. And Ukraine also wanted to get out. So who started that? Some of the, political people, high on the rank, they said, okay, let's get out and be part of that NATO. So United States and other countries, the European countries can help us, and we go bigger, become bigger and bigger. And that's the Russians, imagination that, hey, these people were our people, they have our culture, they have our ethnicity, and they want to get out. And that's the main thing that hurts Russia. And we are talking about certain people, but if we see that Russia has millions and millions of people, when you take out only thing, okay, Putin has nothing to do, he's a leader, but he has power to enforce what the Russian want to do, and that's what is happening. So it's happening. The guy who was in the power in Ukraine, he said, okay, let's get out from this one, and we want to be part of NATO, and that's what happened. So that's what will happen, and that's what the NATO said, okay, we will support you. It becomes just a political kind of thing. There are two different politics now. The United States, NATO politics, and the Russian Kremlin's politics. That's what happened.
Russia's politics of wanting to protect its borders.
That's right. And not only that, other countries separated from the Soviet Union, and they're still part of Russia. They speak at the same cultural kind of background.
Nancy?
I was curious, I just looked up. Ukrainian is a separate language. The vast majority of people in Ukraine speak Ukrainian, but it also uses the Cyrillic alphabet, same as Russian. And it's with Russian and Belarusian in the same language branch, but it also is similar to Polish. So I would assume that most Ukrainians are basically bilingual due to the Russian domination. They understand both Ukrainian and Russian.
Yes, I
Mhm.
think you're right.
Yeah.
Check up also resources.
One thing to mention
Yeah.
is, if possible, we should try to firm up these international institutions.
Mhm.
Like, when you say, you always hear world order, what the world order is the institutions,
Yes,
like the World Trade Organization, money policies, health, all these things. That the United States, the UN, this is all stuff the United States started. That they diminished in recent years. So I don't know if you could do it, but that's our leadership.
building multilateralism with all these organizations that we at one time started.
Yeah.
And they've gone kind of by the wayside. We need to rebuild those. Nancy?
Well, in answer to Tony's comment, Ukraine has extremely rich mineral resources in high concentrations and close to each other. Coal, iron ore, natural gas, manganese, salt, oil, graphite, sulfur, kaolin, titanium, nickel, magnesium, timber, and mercury.
I was right.
Whoa.
When I posted that on Facebook, it's amazing that nobody else understands that, and Putin does. Plus the demographics of age and population that we learned the last time.
Mhm. So we're looking at resource acquisition
And population,
and population acquisition on the part of Russia,
right?
which does have a negative, well, it's not quite negative population growth, but it's going down.
And I would imagine, I always put myself, what would happen if Russia wanted to do what we're trying to do with NATO in Ukraine? If Russia wanted to do something in South America or Central America or Canada?
Yeah,
Well, there's an
Yeah.
answer to that, and it happened in 1962.
I know.
When Russia put nuclear missiles in Cuba, 90 miles
Attempted.
away from
Attempted.
the US. And we got all bent out of shape. We wouldn't allow it.
Yeah.
So when the old Soviet Union is made up of all those nuclear NATO countries right on the border, I can kind of see where he would be upset about that, because we would respond the same way.
I agree. And I realized when we had the last session on the demographics and population and so forth in the world, I understood then why Putin is doing what he's doing to try to get back the old Soviet Union. And then reading about the resources that Ukraine has, and what Russia has is only oil reserves. Ukraine makes a big, importance, is very important for part of Russia.
That's Putin's thing basically is, this used to be the Russian. It's kind of like if somebody's trying to take Alaska.
Exactly.
And then, then we have probably no problem.
And so I said, why not keep Ukraine out of NATO and end all of this?
Well,
If
that's the way out, because NATO
Yeah.
doesn't want them necessarily.
And why do we have to be insistent on? Otherwise, if there is a war there, it could have been avoided.
Yeah.
If we met some of Putin's demands.
So if we meet Putin's demand and say NATO will not go into Ukraine, you can have that buffer.
Yes.
You think everything will go away.
And if it doesn't, then we let Ukraine come in.
And we wouldn't.
Yes.
Ukraine's a sovereign country.
And how can we tell Ukraine not to enter
Yeah.
NATO if it wants to?
Well, NATO could avoid it. NATO has the say so who becomes a member.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm. Any comments from our people on Zoom?
Larry,
Larry?
Well, in response to the question, why doesn't NATO just close the door to Ukraine? Because I think when you look at the charter and the philosophy of NATO, particularly when you got into NATO expansion, it was to open doors to other countries who wanted to come in for the benefits of collective security. And to close the door right now would give the very direct appearance that we are cowering in to the intimidation of Putin, which Putin would appreciate, and that would actually raise his image in the eyes of other countries in the world that are of an authoritarian nature. So I can see why NATO is holding back, but at the same time, NATO at this moment, and maybe over for the next several years, would not want to bring Ukraine into the situation, given the Russian animosity towards the whole thing. I think that NATO would be pleased just with getting Russia to back off on that. Now, I think another thing here in terms of why is Putin and Russia interested so much in Ukraine, it's not just because of their resources, it's because you have a former Soviet province that is now engaging in democracy, which is in sharp contrast to the rest of Russia, which is going along the authoritarian model. And I think that is a source of concern and perhaps embarrassment to Putin.
And what of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Larry? They're also on a more democratic model.
Yes. I don't know if I could you repeat that, Janice?
What about Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? They are
well,
also on a democratic model.
Well, they are, and of course they are no longer part of the Soviet Union and are full NATO members. So they in essence they escaped at a time when the getting was good. Ukraine had an opportunity to do that in the late 1990s, early 2000s, but it kind of piddled around because there was some sharp differences in Ukraine, particularly with the eastern side of Ukraine having a Russian minority. So I don't think you can compare, say, Estonia to Ukraine, because it's just a horse of a different color now.
Okay.
I think we have to understand what NATO is. NATO is North Atlantic Treaty Organization. What happened is during the Cold War, they said, okay, we're going to protect all these people. They are, European white nationalist kind of thing. At the same time, Russia said, okay, here is Soviet Union, we will protect you. So this becomes a partition kind of thing. But why the Soviet Union is gone? And that's why all these smallest countries, they want to be independent. And why we have NATO still there? Because there is no war. There is nothing like Cold War going on that you're gonna protect somebody. That's because, they shouldn't be there like NATO or things like that. And that's why the people say, okay, we are used to be part of Soviet Union, let's get out part of NATO. It's not an organization. It's not United Nations, things like that. NATO kind of thing. Okay, let's have a separate independent country kind of thing. So that's what biggest problem with the Russian also facing that these people want to be a part of the United States and North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That's what happened.
So you think the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's mission to protect Europe from the Soviet Union is now gone?
We don't want to have a war. We don't want to have somebody attack somebody else. And this is it's not the Germany kind of thing that they started taking the country, things like that. Everything has changed because before what used to have, China used to have it, and France used to have separate all the countries, different places. The United States also used to grab some other country. Britain used to have never end the sunshine kind of thing. They had all these things is gone. It should be in different time frame. We should have a different.
We need a different type of organization
Right.
than NATO.
Yeah, that's what's supposed to be happening. And that's what is that understanding, a spirit of understanding between the people. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And we are independent. Whatever you do, Democrat or this or that, be separate. Don't attack somebody else. Don't be part of somebody else. Kind of thing. So this is what the time is. This is new time frame. We are in 21st century, and we have to do something better than what we did in Cold War time. Now it shouldn't be any Cold War.
So NATO needs to disappear and a new
I think this is
organization
what-
take its place.
This is what they, if somebody says there's a NATO, and they say, okay, this is something there, and they shouldn't be there. This should get rid of that. It's my point of view.
NATO is no longer needed because the impetus for the formation of NATO is gone. What new organization should take its place? And should it include Russia as well as Ukraine, Turkey, and all of the other countries?
It's a good idea, but man, I don't think you can do it. It starts from scratch.
It would require a paradigm shift.
And good idea.
Is the European Union a step in the right direction if the European Union expands farther and decides to include Russia and Ukraine? Is that the way that should Europe head toward a more united Europe, including Russia?
But it's often said if you're a trade partner, you're less likely to go to war.
It's true. Mhm.
I don't think that holds 100%, but
Well, let's face it, a lot of Europe is getting its gas and oil from Russia at the current time. There's a huge pipeline being built right now from Russia into Germany. And at the same time, Germany is also building up its use of solar power and wind power so that they don't have to buy as much oil as they have previously.
there's a big conflict there.
Val, what do you think? You're just listening.
I'm wondering, what are you going to do in the Biden administration?
Hopefully never. Ken?
Well, yeah, NATO, I think it was formed back in the 40s after World War II.
Yeah.
as a mutual defense kind of
Defense
thing
pact.
against the Soviet Union.
Mhm.
So if you think about an alternative, that,
Do we need to defend against Russia the way we did the Soviet Union?
well, it's not post-war World War II anymore, but still Russia is a bit of a threat, as you can tell now from just watching the
Mhm.
news. So, would it be better if we had like an economic group instead of a military group? Maybe, but,
It's a paradigm shift. Yes.
I think as long as Putin is in power, we still need to be afraid of Russia. If at some point he's finally out of office or he dies, who knows? I don't know what will happen at that point. And the other issue, I think, if the European Union keeps expanding and takes in some of these countries that border Russia, what happens to Britain? I've never understood why they withdrew from the European Union. And if that would take them out of this orbit entirely, if the European Union becomes stronger and stronger, bigger and bigger. So I think there are a lot of questions about the future.
Russia already moved into Georgia.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's,
they're not staying around.
I know. And the Caucasus is another important resource region that we could talk about.
That only
Yeah, and they're making nice with Turkey. So we've got all these issues. One thing we haven't talked about is the human rights issue. One thing that the video brought up was, do we even care about the human rights issues anymore in this country? Or is that taking a back burner? What do you think?
We have double standards. We sure do.
Double standard.
Yes, what we let Israel do to the Palestinians is apartheid.
Okay,
And we yet, I think we should take care of our own dirty laundry first.
okay. So the whole issues with limitations of voting rights and things along those lines, you see as we're talking about human rights, saying, oh, yes, we need to stand up for human rights, but in practical events, we're not following through.
Exactly.
Okay.
We often talk about the realists versus the internationalists. Realist hardcore, usually Republican. Let's be strong. Internationalists and the realists say, don't mess around in internal politics, man. Let them do it. Doesn't matter. It's a power struggle.
Mhm.
And you're just going to get hung up in this if you're worried about human rights.
Okay,
So it's all, I don't know the answer to that, do you?
that's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
Is it worthy of discussion?
Yeah.
There was a lot to be brought up between the article and the video. That it emphasizes how complicated everything is
Yes.
and the various points of view that are out there in terms of looking at, do we follow the same order that we have in the past, or do we look for a new paradigm? And I read one article that said, we're going to have to let all these old people get out of the way, bring up a new generation, the millennial generation, who will look at things differently and provide us with new directions. But the rulers are not letting those younger people in.
They're afraid.
So let's start summing up. Let's give your final reactions to everything we have discussed here. Scott, we'll start with you.
Reverend
Oh,
Scott?
man. I get to the end of the day and it's like, this is overwhelming. And what are we going to resolve? And I think a lot of it has to begin right back here with us. Putin and the situation with Russia, he's got to maintain his image, and he would love to see the restoration of the USSR again, and we need to be concerned about that. But I'll go back to what I say at the very beginning, is this idea of partisanship and misinformation and a greater focus on our elections and who we bring into the presidency is so important. I think change is happening. I am pessimistic, but that is part of the curve when change is taking place. And I'm not sure where in the curve I am on that change, but I'm hoping and I have the faith that people are beginning to wake up and recognize the situation right here. That's it.
All right, Larry? Yeah, Larry Mortzoff?
Well, I guess I would kind of size it up right now. Things could be a lot worse. At least we have international institutions, and with the situation of Russia and Ukraine, that the international institutions are the United Nations, which are not very effective at all. But we have the NATO alliance, which it is to a certain degree. It's at least going to ensure that Russia is not going to go out beyond the area of the Ukraine, which they very could. Well, could if they thought they could get away with.
Thank you, Larry.
We have to cut
Okay.
you off, Larry.
Bye.
Okay. Barbara, do you want to add anything? Brenda, do you want to add anything?
Yes, just being part of the group today, and I learned a lot about Putin and why he wanted Ukraine that I really didn't have the foggiest idea of why he was so strongly wanting it, but I do understand today, and good being part of the group. That's all.
Okay,
Thank you.
Catherine?
In this article, there's no mention of Putin in anything in this article that was written.
I know.
No mention of Ukraine, which obviously has dominated the TV for the last couple of weeks at least. But part of this thing says China is rising up and seeking to replace the United States as the world's leading state and to reshape or reorganize the rules and institutions of global order. This has happened before. Great Britain rose up in the 18th and early 19th century to challenge and replace France and other European states as the leading power of the Western imperial world of the early 20th century. The United States similarly grew powerful and challenged Great Britain for its leadership in the post-war. So I mean, I'm reading this straight out of Google. You know, Putin hasn't been mentioned in this article at all. Russia hasn't been, but I can appreciate that, you know, all the comments on getting Russia wants him to be in there. They've been buying up in South America because of the minerals and whatnot. They've been doing that for years. And we haven't apparently done anything about it.
Okay.
You the guy, he lists 5 things that we need to deal with, and they all make good sense. You know, and so they're, on the other hand, you know, the internationalists, this guy that wrote this thing's like a liberal internationalist.
Mhm.
It basically, we can have, he wants to have competition and cooperation at the same time, which I think is possible, but you know, it's a steep hill, man.
Yeah, it is.
You know, and then one of them is the crisis of modernity. The world's changing so fast, and technology is, people are going and losing jobs and all that. I mean, just very complex. If we go into, I'm done.
Mary Ann?
Well, I agree with Val, what she said early on. I hope the 4 Trump years were just an aberration. And at some point, we'll get back to our better selves, which I think still motivates a lot of people. And the Day Literary Peace Prize books constantly have themes about immigration, and even books published in the last few years. People still come to this country for the freedom, for the chance to be whatever you want to be. And sometimes it's overly idealistic. But I think if we can get back to promoting those kind of values, our position in the world may change, but I think it'll go back to something similar to what it used to be.
Val?
To add to that, when you say, where are we going? I don't know that we can be a leader in foreign policy until we get our own house in order. And we're not moving in that direction. And the only way that I see us moving in that direction, Biden, it can't do it. Biden isn't, it's just not going to happen. If you're only going to wait for our current president to come fix everything, that's not going to happen, because you've got a whole party that doesn't listen to him, ignores him completely. They just recently had a banking committee meeting. And how important is a banking committee meeting when you want to fuss and moan about, well, you know, we don't have supplies over here anymore, blah, 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 blah. And then you have a meeting and they don't even show up. That's total disrespect. So until we get more moderate voices within a certain party, I don't see this false equivalency. It's just a certain party. And you gotta have more, you need more Liz Cheney. You know, I don't agree with her politics necessarily, but the woman has values. And that's what you have to return to, a party of values.
I would vote for her.
I think she should run for public office, don't you?
Well, you know, kind of unprepared because I haven't read the article. But I, you know, just stuff when I hear on TV all the time, and I think about it. And what we're talking about is some kind of agreement or unity, not just for our country, but for the whole. We, as human beings, only unite to fight a common enemy. And we have an obvious common enemy right in front of us right now with the virus. And we have not been able to come together. As a matter of fact, we
As a world, you're
divided
saying?
more. As a world, as a country, as a city, probably not even within this room. And if we can't perceive something as obvious as that, the P word, the pessimism word, was introduced. I'm an eternal optimist, but holy moly. And so for all of these, I guess, all of us are the older group that's gonna, you know, that part of the population pyramid is, we're gonna disappear. We're on the threshold of that. Might as well be honest about it. And I don't know, these kids, I put anyone under 50 as a kid, they're way too divided. Things that they have to go after, things they have to be afraid of. And the Russia-Ukraine thing, well, it's really, really, really big. Probably because it looks too much like World War I or World War II, where countries are fighting with tanks and things that explode.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know, maybe someone will have to.
Nancy?
Having never studied foreign policy, I really felt enlightened by both the video and the essay. And it's given me a wider perspective that I appreciate.
Okay, Ken?
Well, the article focused mainly on how to respond to China. China being not only an up and coming power, but they're just about on the same level as us now.
Mhm.
And, how can we ever, I agree with what you said, but how can we ever, maintain or regain our position in the world as a leader, as a force for democracy, if we can't get our own house in order, if we've got a situation where in many states, they're laying the groundwork for truly overturning elections.
Yeah.
So I'm not optimistic right now. I think if we can't get our own house in order here, we can never be a leader again.
Okay. Joe?
My takeaway was Mary Ann's comment that maybe a international conflict that if that happens will be a cause for us to come together. It would be unfortunate that we need that, but maybe that's what it takes. It happened in World War I and World War II, not in Vietnam, I would say. So it's a mixed bag as to how well that works. And your comment that maybe there's this millennial generation that's going to step up and take charge, and I'd like to think that's going to happen, but I have some pessimistic about that as well. And finally, your comment that we need to get our act together in order to be perceived as a world power is most troubling to me. And those are my takeaways.
Okay.
We talk about peace, peace, peace. Every year, somebody gets the Nobel Prize for peace. You know how many people there? And hundreds of people. But how they have accomplished anything about peace? Nothing. So the big problem is get out of the thinking. If I have a responsibility, what I will do? The Dayton Peace Museum, I will say, okay, all those peace prize winners come down here. And here, what we will do, we together walk to country to country to country, not on fly, just walk on your feet and bring the people handshake and say, this is what we want. Everybody we want to be together and don't want a peace unless we have handshake and say no more war. War is no the answer. That's what my point of view is. That's, they're billionaires, things like that. So many people, billion. There is one guy in England. He has Peace One Day program in September. Peace One Day. What happened? All the billionaires, they give the money, and for a month, he had a big party going on. Music, this, that, people come over there. One day I sent a letter to him. Why don't you do something practical? Because you have a peace one day. And what is the peace one day? Because his grandfather, the birthday. So that's why he does that one. And United Nations, they say, okay, peace one day international United Nations program. So that's what happened.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Janet. Why don't you have anything to say?
It's complicated.
All right.
Thank
Okay.
you all for participating. And it was nice to see everyone online. So, yeah, hi. And we will come again together
Here, I have it.
2 weeks, and Tony will tell us what we're discussing.
We have climate change, March 4th. And if you look at I'll send you the information. There are 2 links. The first link you watch, and then you watch the second link to get the entire program. But what I did this morning is I uploaded the entire disc. So you could have that, it's YouTube, and I sent everybody the link this morning. So you could fast forward that link to the session on climate change, which is probably,
It's chapter 2.
okay, so it would be the second chapter in the links, all right? Are you doing next week too?
Yeah, I think I'm doing next
Okay.
time too.
Jenny did a very good job.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
And I will set up the appointment for here again. It won't be until maybe the middle of March that we'll get the museum open, or maybe in April. But we'll have some more sessions here. Anybody have anything else to add?
Can I make one comment about the next generation?
Yes.
That is really true. That's when change happens. Old guys die and then, but the problem is, I read this a year or 2 ago. The people in their 20s and 30, up to 35 or something, they're not in the United States. They're not too hot on democracy.
I know.
They don't know if democracy works. I mean, there was like 40% that said we don't necessarily need a democracy.
And so I took you back to the introductory question, can liberal democracies compete in a rapidly changing world?
Right.
We're not even firm that's what we want.
Yeah.
All right,
And
thank
the
you.
Ohio legislature is actively passing bills to make sure that they don't learn anything. So